Hey loves, Darshana here. And I'm getting personal today. I am here to talk with you about my journey to erotic wholeness and the early origins of that and where I am today and a whole lot of what's in between. We would be here for days if I gave you every single detail, so believe me, I'm trying to keep this to the highlights. And it feels really important to do this. One of my strongest values is bringing things into relationship, and those relationships being rooted in authenticity and vulnerability and transparency. And some of the mentors who have been most meaningful to me, the reason for that is because they've been so damn human with me. And that is something that I pride myself on in the work that I do. It's really easy. We can look at people that we view as mentors or guides or influencers or role models or whatever it is, right? It's like, oh my God, they've got something and I don't have it. And so much of what we're indoctrinated into is to constantly be chasing these endless aspirations, this image, this facade, really. And it's a lie. It's BS. There's really nothing that I have that you don't, if we're talking on the most foundational level of things, but perhaps some opportunities and access and experiences that, I have lived through and synthesized and shaped those all together to make this offering. Anyway, there's my preamble. So I'm going to start young. Something that I distinctly remember was getting really curious about my own body and the bodies of other female friends when I was like 7 and 8. And it was held in this like really beautifully curious and innocent way of like, wow, what's going on in there? And I can remember sitting on the floor of a friend's bedroom, both of us with our legs spread out, looking down at ourselves and looking at each other and just thinking like, whoa, like there's this whole thing here that when I touch it, it's pleasurable. And I honestly don't remember the vocabulary that was used in my house when I was a child. I don't have the greatest memory for things like this. But I'm very sure I didn't get express instructions, explanations, conversations to help me get oriented to my body. So this curiosity was arising largely because it's natural, but also because there was a void. And naturally, I was seeking to fill it. I wanted information. I wanted to understand my own body, and particularly parts of my body that gave me pleasure. And then fast forward to early teen years. And again, I continued exploring without the guidance of any adults or elders, really, and just kind of figuring it out as I went on my own. There were a couple of female friends at that stage of life who I experimented and explored with. And that felt really natural and safe. There was a foundation of trust in our friendships that let exploring in the realms of sexuality feel really genuinely good. And it never felt romantic, interestingly enough, at those stages. Like I was fairly clear that while I'm not the straightest arrow out there, mostly I have been in partnership with men, and I have enjoyed sexual and sensual connections and explorations with women for as long as I have been sexual. And at that time, I knew nothing beyond binary gender, and that has expanded, but we'll get to that chapter later. Anyhow, so I started getting sexual with guys shortly thereafter. And again, there was still no guidance. My parents, they weren't sex negative at all, but they also weren't super sex positive, and they weren't really deeply informed. And so it was like fumbling around, figuring things out. I could talk to them about things, but it was me talking to them after the fact rather than them talking to me proactively and preparing me. And so, like many of us, I went on to have a series of different relationships and explorations of all sorts. I had some really, really rocky and heartbreaking experiences. I had a super, super sweet high school sweetie that I was with for 2.5 years, who was actually, as I remember him, like really lovey and romantic. And we had a super yummy connection. So that was very affirming. College was crazy. A lot of figuring out who the hell I was and not being in a good relationship with my body and drunken sex and wanting things that I wasn't getting and not knowing how to get them. And all of a sudden, fast forward through that chapter, and I'm married for reals. I got married at 22. Never saw that one coming. But I was living overseas and I fell in love with someone from a different country. And in our young state and all the feel good hormones and all the things, we thought it would be just a really great idea to get married after dating for 5 months so that we could have greater ease of being in each other's countries. And so we did that. And for the next 6 years, the only person that I explored my sexuality with was my husband. And while it felt good, it didn't feel great. And I can look back and see that there was so much of me that was not being included. And again, there just wasn't guidance. It was the end of my marriage, which dovetailed with a really deep commitment to my spiritual journey, that really and truly catalyzed my path that I've been following to erotic wholeness. Because my sexuality and my spirituality didn't feel integrated, and yet they were both such huge parts of my life. I'd gone from being monogamous for 6 years to single and dating and having sex with different people and learning things that I didn't even know I didn't know. And it was like, oh my God. And there was the beginning of the education, really, because in dating different people and having sexual experiences with different people as an adult in my late 20s and early 30s, I did begin to get what felt like the kind of education that I'd always wanted and started having different conversations. Now, that does not mean all of my encounters were skillful. They definitely weren't. But I learned a lot and I got curious and I began to realize that there were places that I could go. There were people who I could talk to begin exploring. And those explorations, where they led me to was an understanding that sex is hugely powerful, and the ways that we understand it and the ways that we relate to it are narrow. We are missing so much. And as I began exploring my connection to nature and the wilds of the world, to soul and mystery, largely having gone through my own dark night of the soul multiple times over, dissolving my sense of self, upending my life in so many ways. That really was what led me to start orienting toward Eros, toward the erotic, as what I was searching to be in communion with. And if you are, if you've been hanging out with me at all, you've heard me talk about the erotic, and you know that I orient to that as being so much more than our sex, even though it's very much about our sex. It is life force. So all of our creativity, our vibrant, vital self, our sensuality, our sexuality, our emotions, that dynamism, that the way we are embodied and enfleshed and living in relationship with the material world, that is the erotic. And it's a distinctly feminine power, feminine energy, which has nothing to do with sex and nothing to do with gender. When I speak of the feminine in that way, I'm talking about some of the core foundational energies that we all have. We all have feminine, we all have masculine. The feminine is the dynamic one. The feminine is the wild, sensing, feeling one who is in relationship with matter. The masculine is consciousness. Often we talk about the feminine as the river, flowing, flowing, flowing. The masculine as the river banks, holding, containing. And so I started to understand the erotic in this way and was blessed to meet just the right people at the right point in time to keep catapulting me. Because by then it's like, okay, I'd been married, I'd been divorced, I'd built up a really successful corporate career, I was living on the East Coast, my life looked really different, I looked really different, this short hair was not there. That was my journey up until that point, like, a little more adventurous than some, but still fairly mainstream. And then I fell in love. Oh my goodness. Really, I could look back and probably say I fell in lust, and also some kind of kismet, some kind of like sense of like, whoa, we've got medicine for each other. With a man who had been exploring Tantra and sacred sexuality and living a very alternative lifestyle, and I jumped right on board. It was the culmination of my yogic path and my spiritual life up until that point, and my sexuality finally weaving together. And that relationship burned hot and fast, but it really woke me up and lit me up and started to open up the doors to deeper explorations. And from there, it was teacher after teacher, guide after guide, another deeply transformational relationship, partnership that ignited my sexuality as never before, but also brought me down into those realms of soul and the agony and the ecstasy of being a soul in a body and living the human experience. And I just haven't stopped. There is grace involved, certainly. I get it. There's grace in the fact that certain people have shown up in my life, and I have said yes to exploring what was there in these relationships personally and professionally. Little by little, I became very intentional about the professional tools that I wanted to seek out and what I wanted to bring in service to this work of erotic wholeness, which I was not referring to as erotic wholeness at the time. That came after years of working as a somatic sex and intimacy coach, but also in my personal life, deeply exploring in the realms of nature-based soul and psyche work. My big influence in that latter realm is Bill Plotkin and Animus Valley Institute. In the sexuality realm, I'm trained as a sexological body worker, as a somatica practitioner, numerous different tantric explorations. And this list is not exhaustive. There's a lot of other influence in there that has brought me to this moment where the work of and the path of erotic wholeness is what I understood that I was on and what I understood that I am here to be in service to. Straight up, I want to build a movement. I want to create a culture of erotic wholeness, of understanding ourselves as uniquely erotic beings, that deep sensing, feeling, vibrant, dynamic energy that lives through us, that is so much more than our sex, but has the power to transform our sex. And when I talk about power, because power dynamics and the ways that those go sideways and are really corrupted and thwarted in our dominant culture, understanding the power of Eros and learning how to be really intentional with it is so much of what will change things for the better. The things I speak of, it starts very much in our immediate experience: intimacy, vulnerability, relationship, communication, sex, yes, all of that. But then it ripples out wider beyond our immediate sphere, beyond that circle that we occupy, and the concentric circles expand out from there. And really and truly, I believe that on a broad level, the cultural change that we need is rooted in feminine embodiment and power, taking the place of the immature and toxic masculine norms that have pervaded our culture. This is what I'm about. And this is what the path of erotic wholeness is about. And in my work, I love having the pleasure, having the honor to guide individuals and couples along this path And it looks different for different people, but there are certain things that feel foundational, feel essential. And those are the things that I have placed into this map of erotic wholeness. And I did a video about that not long ago. So you can take a peek if you're wanting to hear more detail about the 4 directions and the 4 facets of erotic wholeness. But the journey that I'm offering, woman, wise, wild, and whole, that's my baby. That is what I have poured my heart and soul into, giving you the very, very best of what I have synthesized along the way. All of the maps that I've been given, all of the guidance, the heartbreak, the joy, the agony, the ecstasy. Understanding that there are parts of ourselves that really need us to meet them, to know them, love them, integrate them into our wholeness so that we can really thrive in our lives and in our love. Knowing that we need to embrace the innocence of our eroticism, to have safely guided explorations, to bring the sacredness in, and to bring that quality of power that is trustworthy and generative in. And that's what this journey is about. So on September 8th, right in the energy of the new moon, we're beginning a very small circle that at the time of me recording this is half full. And I'm so excited to see who else is coming in to claim the remaining seats. I would really love for you to be there if you're feeling the yes, if you are hearing me speak and something in you is like, I'm ready. I want this. I need this. I want my erotic wholeness. I want to build this culture. If that's you, then please reach out and talk to me. Let's chat. Let's make it happen. And know that whatever the case, I am here cheering for you, loving you, wanting to offer the encouragement and the guidance and support that I can in all the ways as you chart your course and follow your path to erotic wholeness. Because we are erotic by nature, but we are whole by choice. And it is a choice. So if you're making the choice to say yes, I'm here for you. All right, beloveds, thank you for listening. I hope that there was some beauty and wisdom in here for you, some inspiration and encouragement. And I will see you soon. Mwah.